So this is going to be an interview with you to learn more about you and our family history. So I have some questions here that we'll go through. And my first question is, what is your name?
What is my name?
Yes.
Joan Marie Ward.
And when and where were you born?
I was born April 16th, 1931 in Chicago.
And what were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Mary. Her maiden name was O'Donnell, Mary O'Donnell, and my father was John Hartnett.
And what is your happiest memory with your father?
Well, one of my very happy memories was when he went with me to buy the piano. And he talked me into buying the very expensive one, which I couldn't afford.
Right.
So that's one of my happy memories with my father. Plus all the ones when we were children, you know. Mm-hmm. He used to take us to, we were little, and he worked for CTA, so he always had a riding pass. And he would come home from work. And at the time, we lived around Lawrence, Lincoln, Lawrence, and Western. And there wasn't much, you know, if you went to Peterson or Devon, and then we would take the bus either to the woods or to the lake. There was a bus then there, no streetcar. And so he'd say, well, which way do you want to go this time? You want to go to the lake or to the woods, you know? So, and he did that quite often. We all rode free, you know.
Oh, nice.
So that's some of my good memories.
And what about your happiest memory with your mom?
I had so many, I really don't, I don't know. She was like my best friend, and I'm trying to think. There were so many things we did together, you know, seeing as I was the oldest. Mm-hmm. I was with her when she had all my brothers and sisters, so I can't pinpoint anything, to be honest with you, because I was with her all the time.
Was there anything you guys always did when you were together?
Well, when I got married, and then we bought the house next door on Lansing, and we got to the point where every night, because I had little kids, you know, so every night I saw her all day long, but at night we used to go over at 10 o'clock. We called it the 10 o'clock club, and Ma would have all the coffee going, you know, and me and Mary Jane and her, and of course we all smoked. Mm-hmm. So we would, every night, 10 o'clock until almost midnight, we'd be sitting there rehashing everything, you know, that happened during the day. For quite a long time we did that, until she really sold the house, you know. Mm-hmm. So those are good memories.
All right, and what were the names of your grandparents?
Well, on my father's side, he was, of course, John Hartnett, and she was Catherine. Her maiden name was Buckley. My grandmother's name was Mary Nolan, and my grandfather was Martin O'Donnell. Of course, you know, her maiden name was Nolan.
And is there any particular memories or attributes about any of them that you remember really well?
Oh my gosh. I used to love to be at my grandma's. I was her first grandchild. I was the first of 44. They had 44 grandchildren. So I was the oldest, so I always figured I was the favorite. And I really was. I still believe it. But so I spent a lot of times there. My mom let me spend weekends there when I was little. And so they were great. They lived over there on like around Lincoln Square, Lincoln and Irving Park, in that area. You know, they had a nice house. And my grandfather was quite a quiet man, just like you'd see. He was, you know, Irish. He smoked a pipe. He worked for Bowman Dairy. He took care of all, he was not a veterinarian, but he was the next thing to it. He took care of all their horses. And so when the horses were retired, he retired. So I went to work with him once. He took me to work where the horse barn, you know, where they loaded the wagons and the horses pulled them. So you can imagine how long ago that was.
Right.
Yeah.
They were the ones
It
delivering.
was in probably up till 1940 maybe, and then they did away with all the horses, you know.
Was that because then they were using cars?
Yeah. Probably even before that, but you know. So those are some of my memories with my grandfather. And he died, a year after I was married. So I really had them for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Whereas, like some of my cousins, my youngest cousin is only a few months older than Jimmy, my son, first Jimmy. So you know, the difference in our ages, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good life, that's for sure.
What is the most important lesson that your parents taught you?
I know one thing that my father thought was about the worst thing in the world was a liar. And he was pretty sharp. And we all knew if you did something wrong, you told the truth, you were free as the breeze. You were excused automatically. And that's one thing he really always seemed to stress. It was, you never could trust, you know. And my mother was a little bit of a liar. You know, not anything big, but she would, maybe I'd say she would more be an exaggerator, you know.
Okay.
So that's about, I mean, I got loads of memories, but I can't go through all of them.
Right.
Unless you want to stay here until tomorrow.
We have enough footage. We can keep rolling, right? Okay. So how did our family end up in the United States?
Well, my father came over here more or less as a tourist. He didn't come to live. So my father came over here and pretty good. I mean, he had money, you know, he came well dressed, and I think the story I always heard was there were two versions. They had cattle in Ireland, and Stockard was here. He came to Chicago because it was a cattle center, you know, and I always heard that he was just interested in seeing it. And then the other story was that he came out after some girl that he was friends with in Ireland came here. But I never got to know what the real story was. I kind of think it was, I don't know. We'll never know. But he met Mary O'Donnell, and that cured everything, so.
Stayed here in the U.S. from that.
Yeah. And then my mother's family came over. And my mother was 2 years old. My mother was actually born in Liverpool, England. They got married in Ireland, and they left to go to England to make money for passage to come over to the United States, because my grandmother's two brothers lived here in Chicago. They had already come out. So when my grandfather went to work for this, it was a man who had a lot of horses and cattle. And he was so good at his job, you know, because that's what he did. So he worked 2 years, and my mother was born there. So when my mother was 2 years old, they had enough money to get the passage over here. And I always hear when they got to the ship and they were boarding, the guy said, your passage you've been upgraded. Your employer, as a surprise to him, had him upgraded. So they had great rooms and great way coming over. You know, my grandmother used to say, oh, sure, your mother, Molly, was running up and down the, you know. So that's how they came over. And because she had two brothers, they had a place already for them when they came to Chicago, you know.
So that's how they ended up in Chicago specifically.
Yeah. So that's how they came here, and my father, but yeah. So my mother was really 2 when she got her.
And your father was already an adult.
Yeah, and my father he was about 8 years older than my mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they met here probably at an Irish dance or something, I think.
And what were the Irish dances?
Do you know, I went to them when I was, about 18, 19, and they had Irish dances. And some of my girlfriends and I, you would go there. They were always, it was like being with your family. I mean, they had a band, and a lot of them were young Irish guys that came out from Ireland who we really they were a bit on the wild side, but they were fun. Now, I don't know what they were like for my mom, but I didn't go there too often. Once in a while we'd go just for as my mother'd say, the jollification of it.
The jollification.
So I didn't go to many of them. I was a bit shy anyhow, so.
Where did you grow up specifically?
The neighborhood I grew up, I actually grew up in, I think it's called Lincoln Square now. That's where I went to Queen of Angels 4 years to grammar school, and then we moved in Lincoln Square. You know where that is, Lincoln, Lawrence, and Western. That's where I grew up. Okay. I went to St. Matthias. Then I went to Amundsen High School.
Okay. And what did you do for fun when you were a kid?
Well, there were games kids played those days. Every place you live, you had an alley. And so if you played, like you guys have basketballs, but we would have a ball in the alley and you would throw it up, the garage roofs would come. And there'd be two of you playing, you'd throw the ball up, and then when it was wrong, the next guy was, we would try to keep the ball up on the roof. That was good. And then we would play where it's almost like tag, you'd be in the alley and you'd be it, and you'd close your eyes and everybody'd hide and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Or else go to the park. The playgrounds had very dangerous equipment then, if you've ever seen what we played on. Mm-hmm. It's a wonder where any of them made it. They were terrible. You've seen pictures of those, have you?
I've
the
seen
playgrounds,
yes.
Oh my God, everything was metal.
Yeah.
So I guess that was my fun. Go to the show. Oh no, the movies. We used to go to the movies. Where we lived, there was 2 theaters, the Bertha and the Davis, and the movies changed a lot. And they were all movies. In those days, your parents could give you money and you went to the show. They didn't have to worry about what you were seeing. I mean, everything was, maybe it was censorship, I don't know, but everything was, I don't know what they call those. You'll see them today on old movies.
Oh, like musicals?
Yeah, a lot of musicals and cowboys, Mm-hmm. I wish I loved.
How much did it cost to go to the movies back then?
Well, I can remember where it was maybe 15 cents. And then maybe as I grew older, I still went to the movies. I was 18 and I loved cowboy movies, so the Davis Theater, I would be with my friends. We would go, and everybody in the neighborhood would meet there, at the theater, and they'd be blabbing and playing in And then on Saturday, I wanted to go to see the cowboy movies, but I couldn't go because all the little kids were there, and they used to bring their guns, And so Saturday night, I'd get my brother Marty, who was about 6, 7 years younger than me. Marty, you want to go to the show with me? Which he had just left all day. But he would come because I would give him money. I was working then. I'd say, here, buy this, buy yourself candy, buy yourself pop, So he was like a gopher for me. That was my fun.
And do you remember the first new piece of technology that you or your family owned?
I remember the first television. My father came home from, never told us. He came in the door. We lived in an apartment on Lawrence Avenue. And he came in barely carrying this TV. It was that you put on a table, it wasn't. And it was the first ones out, and I don't even know how he afforded it at the time. Nobody had it. It was I was in high school, 1948, something like that. And the screen was 7-inch screen. And there wasn't much on, but I remember the day he brought it in, and he called the kids that lived upstairs, and he brought popcorn, and he sat us all around, and they were. I mean, I was about pretty old. I was a senior in high school, and the screen was this big, and he sat us all down. He passed out all the popcorn, and we thought we were, so. But nobody else had one, so it was a big thing, That's my first big appliance, other than the radios. That's all we had.
Right. What moment in history impacted you the most?
Wow, impacted me the most. Well, I remember when World War started, in 1941. I was 10 years old. But I was not that interested in it, But I do remember it being a very big. All the young men, most of them just volunteered. They disappeared practically. There were no young men. It didn't bother me. I was only 10, but some, And the other thing was that scared me. It really kind of scared me because I got married in 1955, and we went to Florida on our honeymoon. And while we were there, Russia sent up that, I think it was called the Sputnik. They sent that into orbit, and all the papers and everybody it was like you were scared that they were. What was going to happen? That they could circle the whatever they were doing up there. And I remember at the time papers, and we were wondering, should we go home or, but then it passed, Mm-hmm. And then the other one was that Cuban Missile Crisis that we thought we were really going to be, the missiles could reach us, Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't know, I got used to chaos, I guess.
Right.
And it's been bad ever since.
So, what was your first job, and do you remember how much it paid?
My first job, I doctored my birth certificate so I could work at 15. It was in Kresge's 5 and 10 over on Lincoln Square, and I made 40 cents an hour. That was my first job. And I was so happy. And they used to have a fountain then, and they'd had hot fudge sundaes or something, which I loved. And I would buy one, and they cost quite a bit. I mean, I'd work 2 hours to get a hot fudge sundae, and I always, figure it out how much you make an hour if you were to buy a sundae, mm-hmm. and it costs that much.
Wow. That
was my first job.
And do you remember your first date?
The first date, yeah, I'll never forget it. It was with Jim Ward.
Oh, there.
And that's the very first date, very first, and I was 23. That I actually went out on a date.
That leads into the next question: is how did you meet Grandpa Jim?
Actually, when I worked at the CTA, and he worked at CTA, but he had gotten out of the Army, and he had to come to my office for my boss to get his sign to get back to work. So he came, but I didn't know him at all. He was just a young guy that came in, and he waited there for a few minutes at my desk, and then he left. So I never really met him. A girlfriend of mine that worked at CTA, she was crazy about this guy, and she said, if you would go on a date with him, he's got a friend. And I'm saying, no, I'm not going on a date with somebody I never know. Please, please, please. And I said, okay. So when he came, they all came together. He picked her up, and then Grandpa was, Jim was in the car, and they pulled up in Lansing, and they all got out of the car. That's what people did. They came up to meet your parents, and, So he came up, and as he's walking up, he said, I do know you. And I said, oh, my gosh. And then I recognized him, So it wasn't really... And he met all my family, and I was the oldest, so my brothers and sisters, my youngest was about 5 or 6 years old. And of course, we're like the hillbillies, they all came running out on the porch. Oh, Joan's going out. So he had to meet everybody. And that was the beginning of all of this.
Yes. And when did you get married, and what was the wedding like?
I met him in 54, and I got married in 55. And the wedding was a great wedding. Must have been about 400 people there, because I was the first one in the family of all my grandchildren and that to get married. So it was and weddings weren't like now. You got a hall, and you a lot of people just had like hot beef sandwiches and and beer, but so we rented a hall on Irving Park, and my mother took care of all the food. My father got all the liquor, which was big in that time. That was very important. But the wedding didn't start till 8:00 at night. It was 8 to 12, and there was a lot of people. So everybody seemed, people had a lot of good old times, Mm-hmm. But the Mass was at 11.
11 in the morning.
In the morning. The Mass was at 11. And I was late, 15 minutes late for church. It was quite an exciting morning, because there were so many kids in the family, and my mother had everything set, who was going to ride in whose car, because there weren't many cars either. My brother Jack had a car, and Marty, and my father. So my father went and said, we're late for church. And he kept shoving people into cars, and everybody left. So my father and I are standing out in the street with no car to get to church. And I had this big dress with a hoop in it. And no car, no phones. So finally my brother Marty comes back to pick us up, and he's got a 2-door car, so I can't get in the car. My father sends him back. So now my brother Jack, who was in the wedding, came back, and he got me in the car. And he was not happy because he was in the wedding, And he had just gotten out of the Army. So as it worked out, I got there 15 minutes late for church. And it was nice. It was Queen of All Saints Basilica, but it wasn't there then. Their church was in the school building. It was just a little church in the school. They hadn't built their church yet.
What was the hardest part about raising 7 kids?
The hardest part? Raising 7 kids? When they were little, it wasn't too hard. It was when they were getting older and all going in different directions that I couldn't keep track of anybody. It wasn't really, I never really, I couldn't say anything in particular. It wasn't easy, but I mean, it was,
well, then
it's what I wanted, so.
Yes. Then what was the best part about raising 7 kids?
Now. I don't know. I had a lot of help, I guess. I was home. I didn't have to go to work. And Jim, Grandpa, was great, He was home every day right from work, and he took them here and there and gave me time off, and so it really was all right.
And you fit all of them into one car, right?
Yeah, when we got the station wagon, we camped, and there were no seat belts. And it was a nice car. No seat belts, and they would all get into the car, and just, you'd put the seat down the back so that more people could fit there. And then we had this little wooden trailer that Grandpa and my father built to carry the sleeping bags and all that, and off we'd go.
And how has being a grandparent been different from being a parent?
Oh, it's a lot more fun. It really is. Because being a grandparent, you can send them home. And you can do what you want. And I used to always say, well, they're in my house. If I'm going to give them a cookie, I'm giving them a cookie. It's none of your business, because some would say, oh, they don't, too much sugars. Sorry. I thought it was more fun, being a grandparent.
Right.
And I still do. I love seeing all of you guys come over. Even if I'm not home, I would like you to just come in whenever you want, sit down and do whatever you want to do. If there's something to eat, fine. If there isn't, you guys don't care. So, and I really love that. Makes me happy.
And what is it like to now also have great-grandchildren?
Oh my gosh, that's hard for me to believe. I keep thinking they're grandchildren, because I look at Jimmy and I can't believe you guys got so old. I mean, I kind of look at you like you're children. And I love seeing those little guys, I'd like to see them more, but it's not easy anymore. But with this past year,
right?
And they're only little things anyhow. So, but I like when they come around.
If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, or tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
If I could tell myself something about what?
Anything that you know now or that you wish you had known then.
I can't think of anything that I would do different. I really can't. I mean, I don't know how I was so lucky to have the life I had. I really don't, and I mean that sincerely. And since Grandpa died, I think of that so often. Why was I so lucky? And I even say that to people. I say, I don't know, why was I so lucky? What did I ever do to deserve all that I have? So, I hope it continues.
Right. Well, then my last question for you is, how do you want to be remembered?
As Granny Deer. With deer on it.
Right, D-E-E-R.
Yes, D-E-E-R. And I don't know, just, I don't know. I wish I could think of a way, but just remembered, let's just put it that way.
All right.
And thank you guys for even caring about asking me all these questions.
Oh, sure. Thank you. That's a wrap on.
Well, thanks, Michael and Caitlin. I think.
Yes.
Do you want me to play Danny Boy if I can?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say whatever you.
over. Wait, let me try this. I just started playing it. I just wanted to get it a little lighter after Danny Boy. So if that sounds bad, erase. Will you do me a favor?
It sounds wonderful.
Do me that favor.